Hi guys. The main objective for today is to get the road laid, but before I get to that, the retaining wall needs to be made. To build this, I'm using the same Wills slate walling as the bridge and station, to keep a consistent build style. These sheets are small, so the wall needs to be made up from multiple pieces. These are cut to shape and lightly bent to match the curve of the road. Without doing this, you will have the force of the straight pieces fighting against you whilst they're glued on. I just used my thumb and worked my way along, making lots of little bends. The pieces are now glued together end to end, with a piece of plasticard glued over the joint to add support. I would usually use liquid poly for this, but I went with super glue as I'm short of time, and you'll see why next week. So remember to subscribe so you don't miss it. I did, however, use liquid poly around the join. No chance of it coming undone though. I need to fill the join lines, and I'd usually use a model filler. But I've started using Tamiya pavement cement, as it runs a lot smoother into joints, and it's much easier to work with. To attach the wall into the foam, I use Copydex, as this is foam friendly. Pre-bending the pieces really pays off at this point. And to push the wall in up against the foam as the glue dries, I use cocktail sticks pushed into the base in front of the wall. And I'll pull these back out again in about an hour's time. On the opposite side of the layout, the wall needs to incorporate the bridge over that stream. So I started with this section and worked outwards. Detail is added to the arch with plaster strut. There's no science to this. I just glued little bits on. Liquid poly gives time to adjust these little pieces. The overhang will be cut off when the glue's set. This side can now get stuck down as well. I love how it already changes the atmosphere around the stream. I had a couple of offcuts of road wall, so I decided to add a couple of retaining walls to the hillside. With the height of the road now set with the walling, I can fine-tune the foam to match it. This will be a little lane going down past the station. It's steep, but I wouldn't expect many cars to be around during this period. The main road is amended as well. I can now move on to the road itself. Assistant number 1, seen in the planning video a few weeks back, has helped me by repeatedly stabbing the foam. So the first thing to do is fill them back in with filler. I've added a bit of grey paint into this, which helps if it ever gets chipped off, so you won't see the bright white showing through. The surface is smoothed off with a piece of plasticard. This also helps fill the gap between the road and wall. The railway crossings are also flattened over. When the filler is about 70% dry, I use a cocktail stick to scrape out the flangeways. The road is now dry and I can move on to painting. The walling is first, and this follows the same method as the bridge. I'm starting with grey primer and using pieces of plasticard to shield the bushes and stream from the overspray. The base colour of Anita's grey is now applied. The airbrush is making short work of this walling and leaves a lovely thin coat of paint. I now hand paint individual stones in Deco Art Slate Grey. This will be quite subtle once the wall's finished, but adds a nice bit of detail to it. This is followed by miniature paints number 8 blue-grey, for a lighter contrast. Slate walling varies a lot in colour, so it's always a good thing to add a bit of variation. The whole wall is now dry brushed with light antique white. This not only ages the wall, but adds highlights from above. Finally, the wall is treated with a black wash. This wall is dry built, so it won't have mortar added into the lines. Instead, the black wash settles in the grooves, emphasising their depth. Moving on to the surface, and it first gets a coat of the Tamiya pavement cement, which fills in some of the larger bumps and lines from the filler. At this point, this was going to be the final surface texture, and I was aiming for a neater road. However, I quite quickly moved on to the idea of a rough quarry road, so the lane was covered in glue, and slate dust and fine chippings were sprinkled on. I collected this myself, so it's not commercially available. I have a number of grades to use, and I'll eventually have a video on creating your own. On the main road, if you can call it that, the edge is coated with dry ground soil. Again, my own pickings, and the whole road is sprinkled with the same slate as the lane. You can see how I've banked the slate on the inside of the road as well. The edging also gets a light sprinkling of crushed leaves, again my own product. The whole road is then sprayed with a scenic spray glue by Deluxe Materials. This is ideal for this job, where a ballast glue would flood the road and alter the arrangement of material, possibly clumping it together. I don't want clumping, not here. When the glue dries, I move on to painting. Since the materials used were for texture, not for their colour, the first coat is Army Painter Dark Stone. At this point, I can almost hear you saying that I'm going overboard with this simple road, but bear with me. Next, Miniature Paints Earth Brown is sprayed onto the edges. You might have noticed that the glue didn't seep into the surface at parts, and that the airbrush is lifting it away. I use these spots as potholes. Panic avoided. I'm spraying from behind so it doesn't catch the walling on front. The surface is now dry brushed with a light antique white, which does do a really nice job of catching the stones, and it really picks them up. The edge of the road is now coated with PVA and static grass applied. Top tip for the video, if you don't know this already: tights held over the end of the vacuum will collect any grass fibres not glued on, and you can reuse them. The fibres, that is, not the tights, it makes them quite itchy. So you can see how the grass is much brighter than the scenery around the stream, and it looks too perfect. In fact, under light, the grass is nearly neon. So to amend that, I paint the grass as well. Like that will come as a surprise. The colour is Humbrol 105, it's a nice dark green. And being rain-soaked Wales, we like dark healthy grass. More leaf scatter is applied to the grass. And a brush is used to sweep them into the verge. The final layer of scenery is the bushes and brambles. It's the same as the stream video if you watch that. This starts with polyfibre, ripped into clumps and glued on. I tried to make it a bit random and not a consistent bush the whole way along the roadside. It is natural after all. The white PVA shows here, but it will dry clear. This is sprayed with a spray glue and sprinkled with dark leaves by Knock. Finally, the light leaves by Knock are added on top. Oh, look, it's done. Being the same technique as the scenery around the stream means there's a nice flow throughout the scenery on the layout, And the same goes for the walling. The wall being so close to the railway also helps with the corris vibe. Though work on corris will stop for now, as an unscheduled diorama will be making an appearance, and it has a deadline. And yes, I'm already stressed. So thanks again for watching, and why not check out these videos in my fancy new end card? Bet you'll like them. Cheers.